In the year 2000, I visited the cemetery at Mýrar in Dýrafjörður in the West Fjords of Iceland. I had been there before but hadn't noticed the family grave that now caught my attention. The lower branches of a large tree had recently been cut down, revealing the gravesite. Here before me was the resting place of my family ancestors, going all the way back to the early 19th century. The grave was in a sorry state of repair. There was a large collapsed tombstone, a broken marble cross and a broken iron memorial in need of repair. I felt the grave call out to me to do something. I was a descendant of these people and I had been assigned the task. My name is Sigrún Jónsdóttir Franklin, and I was raised in Reykjavík. I'm a teacher, a guide for the Reykjavík Peninsula, and hold a master's degree in cultural dissemination. I have 3 sons and 3 wonderful grandchildren.
Þetta mamma mín.
Hann með langt hár.
Já, og flott hár.
My paternal grandfather, Guðmundur Franklin, was born at Mýrar in 1887 and died at the age of 31. He contracted TB in Norway while pursuing his studies there. My grandmother, Jóna Guðrún Jónsdóttir, was from Veðrará in Önundarfjörður. They settled down there and had 3 children. However, only my father, Jón Franklin, who was the eldest, survived childhood. His siblings died at the age of 1 and 2, and his father passed away when he was only 4. They are all buried in the cemetery at Holt in Önundarfjörður. After my trip to the northwest in 2000, I made inquiries with the cemetery authorities as to who it was that repaired the iron grave memorials. I learned that there was only one man in Iceland who did so. He lived in the town of Þingeyri in Dýrafjörður. His name was Kristján Gunnarsson and was employed by the engineering works Guðmundur Sigurðsson.
This is Guðmundur Sigurðsson, who established the engineering works in 1913 and spent his entire life working there. And Mathias Guðmundsson, who took over the business and learned the trade from Bjarni Guðbrandur at his workshop. Some years later, Mathias bought into Guðmundur's firm, and together they built the premises here and moved all the machinery to the location. Later, they installed more machinery and equipment. Above was an axle driven by a diesel engine. Belts from the axle were connected to engines below and powered them. For example, if I pull the cord here, then the drill starts working. There were dynamos attached to machines to generate electricity and so provide lighting. They even supplied electricity to the townspeople for many years. In fact, this was the first electricity power station in the locality. During the dark winter months, the electric power stayed on until around 11 at night, or so I'm told. A flickering of the lights was the sign that the locals should prepare to switch off and get ready for bed, or light oil lamps. Here is the storeroom for tools and where the drills were kept, as well as molding machines and various tools that were made as needed. Here you can actually see where people walked about, the very footprints of the master craftsmen themselves. You came in here, then over here, then turned around to wash, and when that was done, the paperwork was seen to. Customers sat here. No doubt there was a lot of chat and debate. Every angle was looked at. How the problem might be fixed, and whether in fact it was possible to fix. During the war years, there was almost nothing to be had. The solution was to be inventive and make things here in the workshop. And so this business enterprise stayed afloat, and everything eventually turned out all right.
I got in touch with Kristján and asked him to evaluate the state of the Iron Cross Memorial, marking the family grave the next time he visited Mýrar, and to give me a cost estimate for its repair. One fine day, as I was looking at some old things belonging to my grandfather, I came across a little book entitled Memoirs, published in 1885. The book has a signed dedication to my grandfather by Mrs. Guðni Guðmundsdóttir, the housewife at Mýrar farm. Guðmundur Franklin Guðmundsson at Mýrar is the rightful owner of this collection of memoirs given by Guðni Guðmundsdóttir, housewife at Mýrar. In the book are the memoirs, obituaries, eulogies, graveside orations, and commemorative poems relating to 5 of those buried in the family grave. I eagerly immersed myself in reading the book and tried to imagine how the lives of these people must have been. The following day, Kristján Gunnarsson called to tell me that cemetery officials had been with him the day before, the exact day I had been reading the book. They had visited the cemetery at Mýrar and supported the idea of repairing the iron crosses there. When I heard this, I was convinced that it was now my obligation to shoulder the responsibility for the upkeep of the family grave. Clearly, this very strange course of events was being determined by forces beyond the control of us mortals. The next step was to contact some of the descendants. We held a meeting and decided to have a gathering at Mýrar on the August weekend 2002. On that occasion, we would officially unveil the repaired iron memorial on the graves of Guðmundur Franklin and my granduncle Guðmundur Hagalín. We asked Valdimar Gíslason, a local farmer and historian, to relate some of the stories of those who once lived at Mýrar.
Sæll og blessaður.
Nei, sæl og blessaður.
Gaman að
Og velkomin.
Takk fyrir. Jæja, þá komum við að ættar grafreitni.
Já.
Hann nú dálítið í niðurslu, eins og sjá má.
Já, þetta fólk kom hérna að Mýrum 1811. Þegar Brynjólfur Hákonarson keypti Mýra. Hann keypti Mýra af ekkju Jóns Ásgeirssonar, prófasts í Holti.
Já, hér hvílir Brynjólfur Hákonarson, fæddur 10. desember 1766, dáinn 21. nóvember 1858. Og Guðný Halldórsdóttir, fædd 27. september 1769. Dáinn 13. janúar 1842. Heldur að þetta sé með bara elstu minningamörkunum hér í garðinu?
Þetta náttúrulega elsta minningamark hérna Mýraættarinnar.
Já.
Brynjólfur Hákonarson.
Brynjólfur Hákonarson bought the farm Mýrar in December 1810.
Desember 1810. Og það sem gerði Brynjólfur.
He was a man of substance, having made good money from catching shark.
80-100 á fornum mati. Það var það að hann hafði efnast vel á hákarla veiðum.
His son, Guðmundur, took over the farm in 1837.
Hann tók við jörðinni 1837.
He was captain of a shark boat, like his father, and also fared well.
Og efnaðist vel á því. Og hann
He rebuilt the church on the farm in 1853.
1853.
By the time Guðmundur died in 1878, his children had taken over the farm.
1878. Þá höfðu börnast verið búin að taka við búsforráðum þarna. Fyrst var það Guðmundur Hagalín.
First it was Guðmundur Hagalín and Guðni that ran the farm, and then Guðmundur Franklin and Guðni managed the farm at the time that Guðmundur Franklin was abroad in Norway, studying agricultural science.
Guðmundur Franklin hafði lært búfræði út í Noregi. Hann hafði lært að synda út í Noregi, Guðmundur Franklin.
He learned to swim in Norway. In the early years of 1881, he decided to test his swimming prowess in the sea near Mýrar. Westerly winds had made the sea quite choppy. In his attempt to swim through the pounding surf, he suffered hypothermia, caught pneumonia, and died that spring.
Og dó vorið.
At the unveiling of the Iron Cross, I read aloud a commemorative poem dedicated to my forefather, Guðmundur Franklin, born in 1855, or exactly 1 century before me. Go now to that beautiful place, be with your father and brothers. Sweet it will be to meet again, and forever be together. Guðmundur Franklin Guðmundsson, you were the truest of friends, bright-minded and caring of others. May peace reign over your resting place. While reading the poem, an eerie stillness descended on the scene. Then a small breeze picked up, the leaves rustled, and I felt goose pimples on my skin. There were others present than the living.
After Guðmundur's death, Guðni shared the management of the farm with her husband, Sea Captain Guðmundur Sigurðsson. He and the family decided to buy 3 boats from abroad and named them Guðni in honor of Guðni, Rósamunda in honor of Rósamunda, Guðmundur Hagalín's wife, and the 3rd ship was called Dýri.
Guðni was a masted sailing ship similar to this large ship and a fine vessel that handled well. The story goes that the elderly Guðni at Mýrar farm insisted that above all else the vessel be sturdy, as strong as an icebreaker, and that indeed seems to have been the case. It was always a special occasion when the ships returned from abroad. Then the people at Mýrar got to enjoy rare luxuries. The home boasted a leather sofa and various other household items that at the time were almost unknown in Iceland.
Guðni and Guðmundur carried on farming at Mýrar until Guðmundur's death in 1883. Then Guðni placed all her trust in her only son, Guðmundur August. In the autumn of 1883, Guðmundur August came down with pneumonia and was taken for treatment to the town of Ísafjörður. But sadly, he died. Guðni was alone. She had lost her brother, her husband, and only son. She continued to run the farm until 1885. Then she asked her brother, Guðmundur Hagalín from Sæbóli, to come and manage the farm.
og tók við búsforráðum.
He would later drown, and once again, Guðni was alone.
Ein uppistandandi enn. Mýrum var búin að missa þarna fjölda aðstandenda. En þá kallar hún
She next called upon her brother-in-law, Friðrik Bjarnason, and her sister, Ingibjörg Margaret. Even though she was now no longer directly involved in the running of the farm, Guðni had enough to do. She took care of the church. She and Friðrik built the church in 1897, and it's still standing. The wood used was especially cut in Norway, and the manager of the whaling station at Framnes had it transported to Iceland and donated 500 kroner towards the construction costs.
Guðni Guðmundsdóttir at Mýrar, born 1838, died 1907. This is the Guðni that had the church built here at Mýrar.
Lét reisa kirkjuna hérna á Mýrum. Systir hans langafa.
The chandelier here, my grandfather donated it to the church in 1850. It was bought somewhere abroad and is said to be from the 18th century. However, it didn't run on electricity then as it does now.
Guðni, hún hélt mikilli rausn alla tíð sem hún lifði.
Throughout her life, Guðni was always extremely generous. She gave willingly to the poor. Like her father, she also lent money to those in need of credit.
Eins og faðir hennar hafði gert. Árið 1907 þegar hún fellur frá.
In 1907, when she died, she was very wealthy. She had money, along with a share in a decked ship. She made it known that half of her wealth should go to a fund intended for young men and women in the district of West Ísafjörður.
Það nú skrítið ef þetta ekki einhver staðar þetta brot hérna eða hvort einhver hefur tekið það til minja.
Þetta einhver mosagróður, það lífið síkt.
Já.
Það tekur sér bólstaf í það.
Já. Sökkva í. Þeir sem að sá með tárum munu uppskera með gleðisöng.
Here in Hólavatla Cemetery, the old city graveyard on Suðurgata Street in Reykjavik, is the largest and oldest cast iron cross in Iceland. Very likely, this is the oldest memorial to be erected in the cemetery. This is a cross marking the grave of one Guðrún Oddsdóttir, who died in 1838. She was the wife of the Chief Justice and was the first to be buried in this cemetery. The story goes that she's the guardian spirit of the cemetery. In fact, it's an ancient belief that whoever is buried first in a cemetery will be its guardian spirit, and their remains will not decay. This the townspeople judged to be a rather miserable fate, and none wished it to befall their nearest and dearest. Consequently, the cemetery stood unused for quite some time, and it wasn't until Mrs. Oddsdóttir dies that her husband, the Chief Justice and a highly learned man, took the decision that she should be buried in the new cemetery. So, at last, the cemetery got its guardian spirit. Below the cross's stem is an image of a lamp that has a Gothic window as a handle. It has been suggested that the lamp may well symbolize a protector or guardian. How appropriate, then, that it should be on the memorial of the cemetery's guardian spirit. As to cast iron, one has read that the Chinese were the first to use the technique. It then made its way to Europe in the late medieval or early modern age. In China, all manner of statues and decorative objects were cast in this way. In Britain it was the same, in addition to the manufacture of practical items. There are even instances where whole buildings have been made from cast iron. There were a few companies in Denmark that manufactured items from cast iron. The largest of these being Anchor Hergård. Icelanders bought a lot of cast iron ovens and memorials. Here we see a cast iron cross manufactured by Anchor Hergård. This type of cross is the most common found in Iceland. We see from the arms that it is divided into 3 parts, meant to represent the Holy Trinity. And here there is a caprifolia pattern at the edges.
Caprifolie munstur á endunum.
This period of cast iron crosses in cemeteries in Iceland is rather short, or from the middle to the end of the 19th century. It was particularly popular among the well-to-do and was quite expensive. There is a cross up on Akrar at Mýrar that was erected by Helgi Helgason, the district's administrative officer. If one looks through the catalogues advertising the crosses at the time, one sees that the price of the one erected by Helgason was 60 krona. While it's difficult to determine what that would have meant, we do know that at the time of Helgason's death in 1863, 1 ship's pound, or 160 kilos of top-quality saltfish, fetched 63 kroner upon its arrival in Copenhagen.
Að eitt svona kross kostaði það sama og 1 skiphund af hágeða saltfiski. Þetta svona til samanburðar.
Þetta virðist í lagi.
When I've been guiding on the Reykjanes Peninsula, I've looked at Iron Cross memorials in the cemetery at Hafnir and the stories behind those buried there. The crosses there are numerous and artistically of a high quality. They're well preserved and nowhere else on the peninsula are they as common. This would tell us that the people at Hafnir were well off. I find much in common between their lives and that of my forefathers at Mýrar. They were district officials for the Danish crown. They built churches and assisted the poor.
Before us you can see the grave of Vilhjálmur Kristján Hákonarson. He was a farmer who also fished and lived at Kirkjuvogur, one of the largest estates in the locality. He built Kirkjuvogur church in 1861. The story goes that in the wake of the great volcanic eruption of 1783, famine was widespread throughout Iceland, and people from the countryside moved to the coast in a desperate search for food. Taking his gun, Vilhjálmur shot a number of seals. These were then boiled and every morsel was consumed.
Skotið þar seli sem voru soðnir og allt var etið upp til agna.
Here we are at the grave of Ketill Ketilsson, one of the three of the same name responsible for building Kotvogur. Ketill was related to Vilhjálmur Hákonarson, who built the church here. They were both Dannebrogtsmen, which is the highest order awarded by the Danish crown. Ketill built Kotvogur after the British ship Jamestown stranded here in 1881.
Jamestown strandaði hér 1888.
This was a huge ship, laden with a cargo of hardwood that had been drifting for months after having been abandoned by its crew. For the local community, the salvaged cargo was a godsend, as the wood could be used as building material.
Byggðu upp hús, bæði hér og víðar Suðurland. Hér til hliðar við kirkjugarðinn.
Here close by the graveyard is the anchor of the Jamestown. Ketill also built Hvalsnes Church. It is built of stone, Ketill getting the idea from the newly constructed Parliament building in Reykjavik and the church at Inner Njarðvík.
A number of broken iron crosses have been placed by the cemetery wall of Hvalsnes Church. Throughout the country, one can find grave memorials in various states of repair.
We're very lucky here in Iceland that we've got quite a considerable amount of these cast iron crosses and railings around graves. Abroad, they've been for the most part removed, particularly in times of war, to be melted down and used for the manufacture of armaments.
Í alls konar vopnaframleiðslu og annað.
It's often the case regarding preservation that documentation is crucial, namely, being able to get an overall picture of what exists and a description of the objects. Around 1900, there was a suggestion as to compiling a register of old memorials in the country's cemeteries. The church council in Reykjavik showed an interest in doing this for the city's graveyard, the largest cemetery from the 19th century in the country, and the one having the most extensive collection of memorials from former times. The National Museum took on the project. I was on the museum staff at the time and was given the task of compiling this register. Originally, there were 323 items on the preservation list. Where we're standing today, we can see the cast iron grave railings that have been repaired in recent times. The number is quite high, and the financial cost involved has been considerable.
En kostnaður náttúrulega við svona viðgerðir gífurlega hár.
Þetta steypijárn, þetta pottjárn. Gamlar vélar sem við langvarðar ónýtar og steypijárn alltaf hægt að breiða aftur og aftur þannig að það nýtist. Setja hér á kantinn svo eldurinn blossi ekki út með lokinu. Setja það aðeins og steinolíu á þetta, duftum því yfir. Og ofan í þessa trekt hellum við úr deglinni og hellum alveg þangað til það kemur upp í hina trektarnar. Þegar það komið upp í hina trektarnar og þessi orðin full, þá öruggt að það komið nóg í mótilið. Þá vantar bara að bræða.
My great-grandfather and great-grandmother were actually first cousins. My grandfather Guðmundur Franklín died young, and my father Jón Franklín is the only child of his that survived into adulthood. My grandfather's siblings were childless, with the exception of his sister Guðný. Sorrow was something this good woman got more than her fair share of. There's the famous remark by the author Guðmundur Hagalín that his mother owed the creator nothing. My great-grandmother, Guðný Guðmundsdóttir, was born on the farm Meiragarði in Dýrafjörður and got married in 1897. Her eldest child, Guðmundur, was born a year later. My grandmother, Fanney, was born in 1911, and last in line was Þorbjörg, born in 1917.
Og síðasti Þorbjörg, hún fædd 1917. Langafi og ammi, þau lifa.
My great-grandfather and mother outlived 8 of their 11 children. 2 of their offspring died as young men. The majority died as young children. There were children christened Rósmundur, Kristján and Franklín, names of already deceased siblings. At the time, communication in Iceland was very difficult and there was no phone. Once my grandmother Guðný needed to go to Reykjavik, and when she returned home, her son Kristján was dead. She said what was hardest to bear was not being there when he passed away.
Þeir flyttu til Reykjavíkur.
After losing the farm at Lokinhamrar, They moved to Reykjavík and became laborers. Hörður died of illness at the age of 15. The foster son would be lost at sea, and great-grandmother died in 1954. I never knew her, but she must have been a remarkable character, since there are many who remember her. Her opinion on matters was highly regarded. I was 14 when my brother died. It was an especially difficult time for the family, and that's when my mother sought solace in the words expressed by my grandmother.
Mikið fjölskyldudrama og þá sótti mamma styrk í hvað amma Guðný hefði sagt. Meðal annars sagði hún
She said that if one felt bad, then it was good to wash floors. The heavy physical activity made one's body tired, and so you slept. I know that they were religious, but they were not extreme.
Þegar líkamurinn þreyttur þá gest hann upp og sofnar. Þá færði hvíldina. Ég veit að mamma og amma.
My grandmother maintained it would be meanness of the worst kind if it was the case that God was responsible for all the wrong in the world.
Það voru víða til fallegu búningar, öllum gerðum og krakkar léku sér með þetta.
I know that my great-grandmother Guðný bought a sewing machine when she got married and started a home. Yes, it's after this costume is sewn. There's no doubt about it that this costume is all done by hand.
En það alveg á hreinu að þessi búningur allur handsaumur.
This national costume, it was definite that I would get it, since I was the eldest daughter of the eldest daughter. Grandmother Fanney never used it, but used part of it for a Charleston dress. My mother had it, and that's when the headdress was added. I got it when I was around 11 or 12 years of age. It didn't fit me when I was confirmed. The skirt was too short. It was sewn around 1890. I think it may have been made when my grandmother was confirmed and the country was celebrating 1,000 years of settlement in Iceland.
Mér datt í hug að það svipaleiti og langamma fermist að þegar það haldi upp á 1000 ára byggð í Dýrafirði.
En þessi búningur breyttist alveg ótrúlega hratt út. Skautbúningurinn.
Þetta hefur líklegast verið fermingarbúningurinn.
Það er trúlegt að þetta, að því að hann er lítill sko.
Já.
Og svo máttu snúa þér, því að það er svolítið gaman að sjá hennar búning á hlið, því að hann er svo agnarsmár. Og hérna, þetta er svona.
Við kveikjum upp náttúrulega og þetta er olíubrennari. Við höfum að ná þessu upp í 1400 til 1500 gráður og þá er svona járn orðið eins og rjómi og þykkt og rennur bara.
The last of my ancestors to live at Mýrar were Ingibjörg Guðmundsdóttir and Friðrik Bjarnason. Their daughter Guðrún married Karl Rieden, who was associated with the company Riedenskaffi. Guðrún moved to Reykjavík. Mýrar farm was sold to the present occupants in 1936. With that, 2 centuries of my forefathers living at Mýrar came to an end.
Hér eitthvað.
Some of us descendants who have survived now take time to remember our forefathers who lived well here at Mýrar, but at the same time endured much sorrow in their lives. They made the best of things here, and now it's up to us, their descendants, to maintain their grave and keep their memory alive.